accept the April 2023 meeting minutes as recorded. Made by Andrea, second by Josh. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have two presentations listed on our agenda, but only one of them is ready for today, and that is Michelle Swisher with the Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation District overview.
I don't check I do have handouts.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. So those of you who don't know, there's a number of years I have been on, but I will go ahead with the presentation. Do you want me to sit down or? That's fine too.
Just there if you want.
Yes, you could have said.
Okay. So I just want to go over the mission of Lewis County Soil and Water. We all come up with our own mission statements. For those of you who don't know, that there are 58 soil and water conservation districts throughout New York State. Even the 5 boroughs of New York City have their own soil and water. But the mission of the soil and water is to support comprehensive natural resource program for county residents, landowners, municipalities, as you, Josh, know. And by implementing projects that will preserve, protect, and enhance the wise use of county's soil, water, and related resources. How districts were created in the first place was through the Dust Bowl. The federal government had the Soil Conservation Service, and then that entitled each state to then have their own soil and water conservation district. And then New York State has their own state. We have a state soil and water conservation committee. So this is our board. We have Ashley Moroff as the Grange representative and also our chair. He's been on for over 30 years. Andrea has been on our board. I don't know how many years have you been on our board? 10 years. Tom Osborne, also on the board, I think just as long or almost as long as Andrea.
5 years, I think, 4 years.
Brian Reap is our Farm Bureau representative, and right now Jennifer Myers is our at-large representative. So every soil and water district has a 5-member board or a 7-member board if it calls for it. And again, Lewis County is 5-member, 2 legislative, 1 Farm Bureau, 1 Grange, 1 at-large. So that is standard across the board. Non-legislative reps are 3-year terms. And then legislative, it is at the behest of the county, how long they want their legislators to serve. We have 4 full-time employees. I have been in Lewis County 17 and a half years. I was also in Orleans County Soil and Water for 5 years. And then worked for USDA for a couple. So always in conservation.
What other county did you say that you?
Orleans County, it's out in western New York, western Rochester. It's like I went to Rockport and that was up there. Mike Durant, our district technician, Carly Daz, our treasurer, and Alexis Linedecker, who used to be the Pratt Northam. We created a position for her there, watershed ag conservation specialist. So, and then if we're successful, which we have been every year at getting a Pratt Northam student, we have a Pratt Northam student over the summer. So a lot of people are like, oh, what are you, state? Are you federal? Are you county? What exactly are you? We are a contract agency with the county. The county attorney is the county attorney, our attorney, according to district law.
Bill, by the way, she just called and asked my opinion, unbelievable.
Is that doable?
So the county legislators appoint all of our board members, and then governor appoints our state committee. But all of our board members are the ones that set the policy for the county, and that's based usually on geography and the needs of the county. You have the New York Association of Conservation District, which is an organization for the board of directors, and you have an employees association, which is an organization clearly for the employees. We are not union. We all have taken civil service exams except for 1, but we don't belong to the union. So then it's the breakdown. You've got your 2 county legislators, Farm Bureau, Grange, and And then there's a similar makeup to the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee. They set policy, they do programs, but again, it's Grange, Farm Bureau, New York Association of Conservation Districts. So the governor appoints those, and then there's advisory members from Ag and Markets, Department of State, Department of Health, and what have you. So, what is it that we do? Most of you know what we do, or maybe a little bit of what we do, but it's anything natural resources, basically. We often involve the public. We did a watershed management plan that certainly requires, input from the public. Project implementation. We get funding to implement projects on behalf of landowners, public, private entities, what have you. We write grants so that we can implement those management practices, and the idea is generally to protect water quality. Protect public health and safety as well. For those of you who don't know, we've had the stream gauges out on the river. That's something that the planning department, helps with, emergency management, pays attention to. We're looking at water levels, so we kind of track, and actually the National Weather Service uses our stream gauge in Dadville to do predictions, because they want to read how the levels are, how quickly they're coming up as to what they're going to predict. So we're working with the National Weather Service River Prediction Center to get that information to them. Natural resource management, you can't really see very well there, but it is actually a picture of us in the county highway doing stream bank erosion project. One thing that's unique about districts is we can work on private property. We can also take public equipment on private property. So we can utilize county equipment to, for this example, is the East State Street Bridge. We were worried about erosion getting worse and worse. So in order to protect that bridge, we can stabilize the stream banks up above and down below, so that the integrity of that bridge is not going to be violated, I guess. Land use planning, you know that we do the environmental assessments for the seeker. That's something we can promote recreation. That's right in our little district law. I won't read to you each and every one of those. I know you can read. Each one of these pictures, by the way, are something that we have been very fortunate to do, is take pictures of Lewis County ourselves. And I think this is the Oswegatchie, actually, Carla took this picture. So it's water supply, flood protection, emergency watershed protection. What'd you say, Paul?
I recognize that picture.
We also assist with right-of-way maintenance, and we can go outside of the right-of-way with landowner permission. We're taking a look at road salt monitoring, as well as trying to work with our county highway and our highways to reduce salt. That's something that's become an issue in waterways across New York State, and we'll see more from the task force that New York State has developed soon. And then, as well as septic system, we work with the county planning department on the Beaver River septic system replacement. We'll go out and with them make recommendations as to whether an applicant is eligible. And then emergency spill containment plans, for example, for a farm. We certainly have a lot of farms, a lot of potential for spill containment, and we can put those plans together.
Does DEC contact you to get involved in spills?
Not usually in spills. If we get involved in complaints. So if there is a manure complaint, any kind of complaint, if it has to do with environmental management, they'll defer to us first. We will go out. I'll go to the next one. We have what's called the Ag Environmental Management Program. It's unique to New York State. It's basically an inventory of a farm. We needs assessment. We prioritize what's a water quality concern and what's not. And then we can apply for funding on their behalf to be able to implement those practices to protect water quality. Now, protecting water quality doesn't mean it's always protecting air quality. Stored manure smells. It does, but it does protect our streams. So you were asking about that. We go through the AIM, program to do that. So land use planning, we have soil interpretation, stormwater, stream, floodplain, management, recreation, all that. This actually is a picture, you can see it's a digital elevation model. Martinsburg is actually right under layout, under project implementation. We, wrote a grant with USDA to try and get LiDAR for the Black River watershed, and that's basically to come up with accurate 2-foot contour elevations. We hope eventually that it leads to coming up with better floodplain maps. It's, an option, just like you can have the aerial photographs run over Lewis County. They can also do LiDAR, which gives you elevations, not only of trees and the ground, but of buildings, what have you, kind of a 3D.
That's in process, isn't it?
The aerials and obliques is in process. They didn't choose to do the LiDAR. I'm sure it's not cheap.
Oh, they didn't choose to do.
I don't believe so. I don't know if it's candy.
We're doing LiDAR for our own purposes of tax assessment, but not for.
I thought we were doing photography too.
Now, I haven't seen that. We don't have full coverage for Lewis County yet. That's what I've seen. I think they're gonna do it in the Mohawk and the United Lake watershed, but I haven't seen anywhere else where it's planned. For those of you who don't know, we are deemed the lead agency in Lewis County for the management of non-point source pollution. So we actually have a water quality coordinating committee. It's an ad hoc committee. The committee's purpose, is to evaluate some of the issues, take a look at the priority water bodies. What are the practices we can put in place in order to reduce erosion, reduce issues that we're having with water quality. Members, we, on occasion, county highways there, county planning, rec, forestry, and parks. Jackie's our vice chair. DEC, Department of Transportation, as well as Department of Health, Tug Hill Commission, lake associations, and citizens. Now, we don't have consistent lake association, always there, but we've worked with Branningham Community Association, we've worked with Chases Lake Association, actually developed a shoreline project for landowners to protect water quality for the Chasers Lake group. And we've also, worked with Lake Bonfire. So I say, what is, non-point source pollution, just so for a definition, it's basically anything that doesn't come from a point source. It doesn't come from the wastewater treatment plant or something that's regulated by DEC. It's something that it could be overland flow, it could be over parking lot flow, those kind of things. Septic systems, stream bank erosion, all of those can be non-point sources of pollution. So kind of just a diagram and a little definition there, because a lot of people, unless you're in this world of soil and water, you don't know. So we don't think that. In order to do these projects, we are also, and have the Water Quality Coordinating Committee, we are members of the Finger Lakes Lake Ontario Watershed Protection Alliance. This is called FLOPA. Because we don't want to say that every time.
Say it 3 times quick, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that is a line item in the Environmental Protection Fund, and there are 25 counties between Health Department, planning departments, and soil and waters that are involved in this. And it's basically involving the light blue, all of that watershed actually goes to either Lake Ontario, Finger Lakes and Lake Ontario, and then you've got the counties who actually are members in the darker color. But this funding allows us to hydroseed for our municipalities for free. Allows us to have the Black River Watershed Conference, public information and education. It does the Black River Trash Bash that we have every year. It's a shoreline cleanup. We choose a spot. It's traditionally been Eatonville. Places where people go to recreate and make sure that the areas are cleaned up. Again, we have the water monitoring and emergency flood notification. That's right on our website. We also do take on drinking water testing. We don't actually test it ourselves, but we take it for Converse Laboratories. And then we do culvert assessment and replacements to promote fish passage. We're actually working with Trout Unlimited and the town of Croghan and the town of New Bremen to replace 2 culverts. I think we're increasing the mileage, at least 3.5 to 7 miles of fish passage by replacing these culverts. And it's a priority of the town and as well as, a priority based on our assessments.
Is the town replacing the culverts or are you? replacing?
So, Trout Unlimited. Here, let me go back. Trout Unlimited, we went in on it, we applied for funding through Sustain Our Great Lakes as well as the New York State Water Quality Improvement Program. And we've been successful at both. Trout Unlimited is administering that funding and those will be replaced in 2024. So the town's input is their in-kind. Basically, they're gonna, haul,
Mhm.
stone, repave, those are all considered, the
Right.
finish products, so.
'Cause Tim is very good at culvert replacements too.
Yes, yes, we work, yes. So a lot of people, you can't, it's a very faint boundary, but, you can see, everybody knows what the county boundary looks like. But these are the watersheds that we have in Lewis County. Now, the orange and green up top is clearly Oswegatchie and St. Lawrence, Indian River. Those are all considered the St. Lawrence. Then you have Oneida Lake that's wiggling on the bottom. Then you've got the Black River watershed, which is the main green part of it, as well as Salmon River, Sandy Creek, which is the red on the left. And then a teeny little bit of the Mohawk River watershed. A lot of people never see these maps to understand, but that's how we work. Because we're working with water quality, we're working based on watersheds. So watersheds don't know political boundaries, so we're working with all sorts of other soil and water conservation districts. We've got 8 districts in the St. Lawrence, 5 for Oneida. Black River watershed, there's 5 counties. Salmon River and Sandy, we've got 3 counties, and then the Mohawk River Watershed Coalition is 14 soil and water conservation districts. So we're working together, again, to implement practices to protect water quality. So a big source of contention, particularly this year, got a phone call that, there's a draft change in our laws and is creating this draft. It's been brought to the Assembly or Senate, but I don't know if you've ever seen our district law, Joan. It's very small. And these changes have been drafted by the Watershed Coalition to basically change how soil and water conservation districts work. Right now, our legislature appoints our board of directors. One of the things that is of concern is they plan on making it general election. So
For the
they,
entire board?
at least for the legislative members,
Oh.
that was what was proposed. I do have a draft of that. I didn't know if you wanted 35 pages, so I didn't provide you that. But that's a concern. They're requiring, this draft is requiring district boards to go to 7 members. Now, I'm going to ask you in the end about appointing an at-large member, because we do have a hard time, keeping the 5 members, because people are busy. And this, would be a problem requiring a 7-member board. This draft legislation is to establish a soil health fund requiring New York State tax to be assessed on commercial fertilizer use. Eventually, that tax is coming down to farmers if this is ever approved. I think that we're taxing our farmers enough, but I mean, just, It does propose to remove the Farm Bureau as a representative of the state committee and the local committee.
Who drafted this?
Right up there.
Steve Cooley.
So Steve Coletti is actually changed law in Iowa, Kentucky, and Massachusetts for conservation, the conservation district law. And this organization has been working with him to change it. Now, again, this has not been brought forward, but never has the soil and water state committee, directors association, employees association, or an individual district seen this until it was full draft. So
No
this,
input.
no input whatsoever, no.
So what's driving it? Why would anybody even undertake
Well,
the task or
Um,
fund the task?
there is a lot of money in the Environmental Protection Fund. That is where we, get our funding from. And some entities are not eligible for that funding. So this would make it eligible.
Are you eligible?
We are eligible as a soil and water, yes.
So why are they changing you?
It's not, it wouldn't be it would be adding their eligibility. It wouldn't be changing our eligibility, it would be adding their eligibility.
Yeah, but why recreate the wheel just to get somebody in a funding stream?
It's a good question. Again, we have not been, nobody ever came to us formally and said, this is what's happening. We have somebody who is a representative on our state committee who has been part of this planning and never brought it up at the state committee meeting.
Is this state driven or federal driven?
I think I don't know. That's a good question, Larry. There's, questions as to why this was ever brought up, but I can tell you the State Range and the State Farm Bureau vehemently oppose. New York Association of Conservation Districts as well as the Employees Association oppose this. Our law is so general. If somebody was an organic dairy farm, they could be on our board. There's no, anybody could be a Farm Bureau member. You could be a range member, you can be an at-large member. There's plenty of possibility, but this draft law is pigeonholing the positions and taking Farm Bureau and Grange out of it. So
I guess my question is, who's driving the train here and do you need us to push back?
So a lot of districts have had a resolution. And I actually have a draft resolution that would support, opposing this draft legislation. It's long, so my apologies. I'm just following drafts that they have across the state because it's certainly been a concerted effort to oppose this. To go into elected officials is something that that means it's taking the power of this board out of appointing individuals. It's disconnecting us with the county,
With the people
which weakens
involved,
us.
directly involved.
So, this is just a letter
I guess you
requesting.
don't need that new office space then.
Which I do. So I know that Essex County, St. Lawrence County, several other counties have had this resolution go to their either board of supervisors. A lot of this is modeled after Hamilton County Soil and Water, and their board of supervisors recently passed this in March. So, definitely that's something that we would like. That resolution go forward. Like I said, the resolution is long, but it does show you, it takes you through the process of, where it comes from and, who's opposing it. So, Phil, did you have a question?
Not at this point.
Okay.
I'll wait till the end. I got a couple, but I'll wait till,
Okay.
unless you're at.
I have one more slide, so. So the other question that we had is, we currently have an at-large board member who is unable to continue. She has to resign. Just owning her own business is, generally, she just doesn't have the time to do it. So we have asked around, and Fred Monk, who currently now works for DEC, the Natural Resources Supervisor, we've asked him, and he has said yes, it's the at-large position, so there is no entity to go to other than requesting the legislature to appoint Fred to that. This next year, he'll be retiring, And so he's looking, and I think this is a perfect fit. He's got the forestry background, which is one thing that we don't have on the district. So
When do you need that appointment by?
as soon as possible.
I know Fred really well, and he'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So that is all I had. I hope I didn't go over too much.
Could you get a additional copy to John?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
You can pick it up.
So your recommendation is to, you support this opposing resolution?
Yes.
I wonder what our percent of the dairy farms or agriculture in Lewis County is organic. Maybe Michelle knows, but if we even have one, I don't know about it.
We do have some.
Yeah, we have about 3 right now. It's been a little volatile right now just because the market's been changing so much. For their ability to ship organic milk.
So for 3 farms, they get a whole seat on the board.
That's the draft proposal.
And again, it's not that they can't be represented, because they could be
Right.
represented through the Grange or through the Farm Bureau. We're just carving out a special position for what is really a niche market. You know, I don't think we're opposed to organic farming, but
No, of course not.
that's certainly not the bulk of.
It's not representative of Lewis County
No,
in our
no,
parks,
no.
for sure.
When were you established in Lewis County?
January 8th, 1946.
Wow.
She was there.
No, I was not. I was born in Virginia.
That's even before I had issues with your trees. The deer like them more than I
We do promote feeding wildlife as well.
Well, they're working, that's okay.
Yes.
But that's a good program, it really is.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we had over 14,700 seedlings and transplants that we sold this year.
Really?
So trees are getting planted.
What's really popular for trees?
What's really popular? Balsam fir. Everybody wants the Christmas tree, and they're hard to get. So
Really?
yeah,
Interesting.
it's probably the most fragrant Christmas tree.
Yeah, I just,
It's sap a lot,
surprised
too.
would be possible.
Ian, do you want the committee to move for that appointment so we can have it in the packet for the June meeting?
I think, is everybody okay with that? Maybe between now and then, if we could, I don't know if you submitted a resume or whatever material you had, or was it just sort of?
No, I've just worked with him,
Okay.
so much before, prior to him moving up to the natural resources supervisor, because he used to be located right here in the operations at Denver.
Randy Waldo.
And he's retiring from the DEC right now, so he's been,
That's- yeah.
he's been employed there. I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't know.
part of this, do it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor, or any discussion?
Does the committee want to move this opposing resolution?
We can do that too. There's a motion on the floor right now for the. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed, nay? All right, and would anybody like to just move the resolution in opposition of the draft legislative proposal?
Oh, I'd be happy to do that.
Phil had it first, so first by Phil, second by Dick. Any discussion? Just thanks for bringing this to our attention, Michelle.
Thank you for your time. Sorry if I went over.
No, you're not.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. This is extra.
Now we'll move on to dockets.
The first docket is appointing James Dickob of New Bremen, New York, as a member of the Lewis County Junkyard Review Board effective January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2027.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Pursuant to local law number 2-2007, finding and determining that an unsafe structure shall be demolished and removed, and to set hearing for final order at 312 number 4 Road, Town of Watson.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Pursuant to local law number 2-2007, finding and determining that an unsafe structure shall be demolished and removed, and to set hearing for final order, 7091 West Main Street, Village of Port Lighting.
Any discussion?
I would just add that that's one of the main brick buildings on Route 12 intersection there as you go through town. So,
I think the mayor reached out expressing their board support for this as well. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing supplement 1 to agreement between Lewis County on behalf of Highway Department and Fisher Associates for Marshy Road over West Branch Oswegatchie Bridge. Project to provide sub-consultant services related to National Historic Preservation Act compliance for this bridge as set forth in the proposal at a cost not to exceed $26,000.
Any discussion?
I'd just like to mention that up there, that's always been known as a steel bridge, because it was the only steel bridge in town for so long. They were all wooden. And that was before my time, John.
Yeah,
So I understand the historic part, I guess.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Approving an agreement between County of Lewis on behalf of Lewis County Highway Department and CNS Engineers to provide the design and other scope of services related to the Complete Streets project on Blue Street and Main Street, County Road 41 in the hamlet of Glenfield, New York, at a cost of $171,724 as set forth in the proposal.
Any discussion?
I would just like to add that later today, we're going to have folks from Rochester's Cornerstone Group talking to the Finance and Rules Committee about their plans in Glenfield. And it would be really great if state funding would align and the project could align where, we're able to complete this project with new street, stormwater, and sidewalks there at the same time that they're opening their facility. I think that'd be awesome.
A freeze warning has been issued for your location.
whoa. Bring your
Certainly
plans.
Peppers have decided. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Awarding bid and authorizing agreement with Tioga Construction Company for the replacement of West Road culverts over Mill Creek and Mill Creek tributary in the town of Turin in the total amount of $825,000.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Ian, our budget for that project was $1.1 million, so we're quite pleased with these bids.
Excellent.
That's the Marcia Shelley program, right? That's our cost.
We're gonna use CHIPS funding for this because it'll last more than 10 years. So it makes sense to use state funding for something like this and use our funding for some road paving. So it's just about moving money
All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Was that that was the last one.
I would like to point out that there will be a resolution for the June meeting for awarding the bid for the demolition of the Trinity Ave property. The bid opening will be held May 18th at 2:00 p.m. And then we will also have another resolution, hopefully to award the bid for the PSB parking lot project. That bid opening is May 25th at 10:00 a.m.
Thank you. I see we don't have any motions. Is there any other business to bring before this committee today?
Okay, I know that Park Strategies will be here next month in June. They're committed to coming on June 20th.
Okay, so that's to discuss the ATV advocacy and lobbying that we're doing, right?
Yeah, they've helped us with a number of issues, not just the ATV issue, but very good news. Larry and I talked with Kevin earlier this week, and from Kevin Bronner from Park Strategies. And there is a bill that has a Democratic sponsor in the Senate and the Assembly. The final language of that bill, Kevin's actually working on drafting himself, with, of course, those senator and Assemblyman's legislative teams. But we expect that it will be introduced this year before the end of session. There's only a few weeks left before the end of session. The state budget negotiations have really eaten up a lot of that legislative time. I wouldn't get too excited about something passing this year, but having a bill introduced with Democratic sponsors means that it will be taken very seriously, and we'll get to see who comes out of the woodwork to oppose it and support it. And it's a big step forward, something we've, further than we've ever made it.
What would it say?
Larry?
The meat of it is to allow registration up to 2,000 pounds, 70 inches wide and 2,000 pounds. They are allowing, like, 1,000 pounds and less would move up to $15 a year, or there will be the opportunity for non-resident at like 1.5 times the base resident rate. Then there's a second category for 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. That is like $40 resident, maybe $65 non. And then the final one, I think, is $60 resident. 70, I'm guessing now. It's more as a non-resident. It's interesting that, I don't know how they are going to wrap this in, because there isn't any other program that has non-resident ability. So, but this is, as Ryan pointed out, we have Democratic sponsors for it. Manion, Billy Jones, and I think another one are all involved in supporting of it. So it could move.
And Senator Manion has kind of been, he represents Onondaga and parts of Oswego County. He's the state senator that, along with Billy Jones in the Assembly, is hoping to move this. He's doing an ATV ride in Oswego County on June 3rd. So they have invited us, anyone that wants to participate in that in Oswego County on June 3rd, just to kind of show our support for this industry with the senator who's hopefully going to be moving the legislation.
We've had Republican support for years for this. It's just always been an issue because it's the Democratic controlled legislature, finding somebody across the aisle who can jump on board with this. But it should be a bipartisan thing because it's a win for everybody, for riders, for the state, for the municipalities.
One thing Larry didn't mention is that I believe 10 or 15% of the registration revenue is going to go to the draft language right now, that it goes to the Environmental Protection Fund. That's kind of a offsetting.
That needs to be ironed out, because in the bill as it stands now, it's someone else. So
Gotcha, okay.
one of them is something autistic group. So it's interesting. That's something that's going to be changed, I guess. That's not cut and dried, I guess, the DEC.
Well, by the time Kevin comes here on the 20th, the bill will, if it's going to be introduced, we'll let them introduce it, right? About more detail.
If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second by Andrea. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Make sure that's-
before we begin, Ian wants 5 minutes on the clock. Go.
Okay, so Ryan and I, we both forgot to mention this, but I wanted to update the General Services Committee and the board generally. So one of our legislative priorities for this year was to discuss court consolidation. That's been kind of a pet project of mine and Ryan, and I know a couple other folks have been interested in it. We had a very productive meeting with the Lewis County Magistrates Association, I think it is. So it's all the town and, well, it's just town justices at this point. And I just want to thank also Judge Neary for traveling up, and Judge Gideon, and then Judge Merrill was there as well. So kind of brainstorming ideas about consolidating our town courts and also getting input from the magistrates as to what they thought. And we came up with some ideas as far as how we process arraignments in Lewis County. And then one tangible thing that we might work out into a proposal for the county to take on. A couple of years ago, as many of you will recall, the Tug Hill Commission did a study with the towns of Harrisburg, Montague, and Pinckney and recommended consolidating those 3 courts and having one single justice, and that's worked pretty well for them. I think Judge Woods at the time was the mover behind that. What we're looking to possibly do is have the Tug Hill Commission do a complete review of Lewis County and identify potential towns where consolidation might make sense in the future, rather than going the district court route, which is a much bigger effort. Just seeing if there are towns where maybe it makes sense, again, to combine the courts into one judge, one office, one clerk, in order to save money and then simplify court proceedings. So we don't have anything concrete right now, but that was sort of the results of the meeting. It seemed to be well received by the magistrates, and we may have something. And again, it's not a county level decision, but because it involves multiple towns to do something like this, it makes sense for the county to be the ones pushing it. But it could be something that would save money for the towns in the long run, which benefits everyone. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Ryan.
In order to do the centralized arraignments, a lot of counties have, so right now, the magistrate, part of what's difficult for that job is, along with our prosecutors and our public defenders, is they all have to get up in the middle of the night in order to do an arraignment at 3 a.m., right? Weekends, holidays, everything, we have to have an arraignment. If we had a small holding cell where we could wait till 8 a.m., 9 a.m. the next day, we wouldn't have to ask the magistrates and our prosecutors and public defenders to get out of bed in the middle of the night. We could just do the arraignment the next morning. The problem is we traditionally have not had space for that holding cell at the county jail. So Lieutenant Thayer from the jail and Ed Emilio from the sheriff's office, who often is involved in those arraignments, were at this meeting as well. And we might try to see if there's some like a small capital project that we could even pull off maybe this year to try to create some space in the jail for a small holding cell. That would really save everyone a lot of time. And it would save us money too, because we pay stipends for our attorneys to go to those night arraignments. So it could be a big deal all around if we can find a way to do it.
I think weekends and nights are more expensive to put in.
I'm sure they are, yeah. So simple fix, but it seems simple, but when you look at all the logistics of our jail, it's not so simple. But if there's a way to do it, but we should, pursue that. So.
That's all I have. Thanks, Lisa, for the time.
Oh, and I
4 to 12.
It's getting all close. Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve the April 18th committee meetings, if no amendments. If I could get a second. Thank you. And first up, presentation, it is Ryan to talk about the EMS ad hoc committee final report.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd invite Bob to come up and join us, and obviously Andrea and Jeff and Lisa all participated in this ad hoc committee. So I would ask everybody to kind of chime in. We don't really have a formal presentation. It's just going through the report and kind of having some discussion on some of the items that have come up. So
You're
what
gonna
you
like it though. Phil, you're gonna like it.
I'm gonna like this. Okay.
Phil likes all my presentations.
That was the driving That was a driving force. We just wanted to put something together.
How much time did you give Ryan?
What?
How much time did you give Ryan?
They said 20 minutes.
He took it instead of me, so it wouldn't run over. And it won't be death by
The
power.
only, the only one more long-winded here than me is Bob.
Ouch.
So formally, the ad hoc committee was represented by 3 legislators, Legislator Morahan, Legislator Mellenbeck, and Legislator Berkler. In addition to them, we had several community members and EMS providers and leaders across the county were involved. We had myself, Bob, Jen Marchione from Bob's office, Josh Levesque, the chief of Lewis County Search and Rescue, Bob Mullen, town supervisor in Loudville, Scott Doyle, town supervisor in Denmark, Marcy Teal, the chief nursing officer at Lewis County Health System, Bobby Call, the director of emergency preparedness at Lewis County Health System, Jim Devers, with, I believe he's still on the board actually at Lewis County Search and Rescue, but he's a retired EMS provider in Lewis County with a lot of years of experience. And Larry was on the board ex officio as the chairman. So you can see on page 2, a lot of our members, in addition to their roles as county leaders, are also EMS providers in their own right or retired EMS providers. The authorization for this committee goes back to January of 2022, as one of the goals that the Board of Legislators wanted to address during that time was the continued shortage of EMS providers in Lewis County. Bob actually gave a presentation about this topic in 2021, which kind of spurred the board into thinking that this is something that the county needs to take a larger leadership role in. So over the course of the last 18 months, the committee has met 4 times formally, and Bob and myself and Jen and Jeff and other people have met several other times outside of those committee meetings. And basically what we have here is some basic research on how things work in Lewis County and what are some of the challenges. And then there's a series of policy recommendations that the committee is asking the Board of Legislators to consider. So just basically in Lewis County, there are 6 EMS agencies that cover the county: Harrisville, Beaver Falls, Turin, Lyons Falls, Constableville, the J.S. Coster Hose Company, which is Port Leyden, and West Leyden, and of course Lewis County Search and Rescue. We also have 4 agencies that serve Lewis County from outside the county. That is Carthage Area Rescue, Natural Bridge, Boonville, and Camden. Last year, we had 2,600 EMS calls in Lewis County. We know that Search and Rescue's paid staff covered about 1,500 of those, which means 1,000 calls a year are covered by purely volunteers in Lewis County. So obviously a large number, I'm sorry, it's the other way around, 1,500 calls per year are handled by our volunteers. Really, if you look on page 3, you can see, the impetus of this, the reason why we put this committee together is the number of total providers in Lewis County is down, pretty significantly since 2012. And some of the folks that were involved in times before 2012 can attest that if we were to look back, 20, 25 years, the numbers are probably down even more from the number of volunteers that we used to have. So the central thesis that our committee came up with is that the best way to move forward in Lewis County is actually to try to support the volunteers that we have. One of the big reasons that volunteers are kind of drying up in Lewis County is the time commitment required. Each call we've figured out is about 4 hours per call for an EMS provider. So if you're a volunteer taking time away from your work, it's increasingly challenging for folks to make that commitment of 4 hours per run. In addition, the recertification process and in-service training process has become more burdensome. The state regulations, in a lot of ways, potentially are a good thing. When an ambulance shows up, that you're going to have a certain level of care. In other ways, though, it's an incredible demand on volunteer providers to be able to meet those hours of training. Bob, can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
So when you hear the number 4 hours, it's not 4 hours in the back of an ambulance per se for that particular transport. You've got preparatory time for getting to the ambulance station, getting in the ambulance, driving to the call, actually doing the call. And then there's the time afterwards for doing the electronic pre-hospital care report. Back in the old days, that was a triplicate, just a piece of paper that you just wrote your notes on, and that was the end of it. Now they're actual SOAP notes that are actually sometimes more in-depth and the same quality that your average RN would be doing in the emergency room. And there's even more points on top of that. And all of that just takes more time, but what it does do is it generates data. In order for anything to move forward, you need data as to what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. So that's where that 4-hour mark comes from. The quality of care and the number of skills that basic EMTs are doing now has virtually doubled in the past 5 years. Acquisition of 12 lead EKGs, which was unheard of before, that was a strictly paramedic skill. But they're not interpreting them. All they're doing is acquiring them and then sending them to the hospital so that the hospital can just say, okay, I see something in this, you shouldn't bring them here, you should go to a STEMI center and pick up ALS on the way. So it's getting a better field quality of care, and there's just a tremendous increase in skills that the EMS providers are able to do.
So one of the other contributing factors towards the time commitment increasing is interaction with the hospitals, which has really changed. Before COVID it was changing, and now it's, post-COVID has changed even more. It is not uncommon for a single EMS call that, normally would have gone to Lowville, Watertown, or Carthage. They're getting diverted oftentimes where emergency rooms can't take additional people or don't have the staff. The switch of Lewis County and Carthage to critical access means the amount of calls we can take is different. So it's not uncommon for these calls to be going to Syracuse, Utica, Albany, Binghamton, Westchester. When we were talking about this in committee, it's crazy the places that some of our providers have gone to on what you think is a simple call when your radio goes off. And then once you get to the emergency room, I learned about this thing called wall time, where you have brought the patient to where he or she needs to be, but the emergency room isn't prepared to take them. And so our EMS providers, again, majority volunteers, are spending their time in the emergency rooms continuing to care for the patient as we wait for the hospital to take the handoff. And that's time that has increased over previous years as well.
That's not to be misconstrued that we get that particular problem at Lewis County General, because that's an exceptional rarity. We might have to wait for them to prepare a room, but if we recognize that there's a heart attack going on, or we recognize a stroke going on, they need to go to those specific centers, and that's where we end up with the wall time. That's where we end up with 40-minute wait time standing in the entrance way of their ER, just waiting to get in.
And then one other thing the committee pointed out is that the lack of urgent care in Lewis County creates additional EMS calls. People that might have popped into an urgent care or driven themselves. Now, if they've got to go to the emergency room, or they've let something that could have been preventative become more acute because we don't have an urgent care, then that has an effect on EMS calls as well. So all that is to say that the time commitment of our volunteers is what we've identified as the biggest factor. It is the amount of time that they have to spend to do this service for their community for free is becoming unreasonable, and a lot of people are deciding that it's not worth the time to do it. So that was our main thesis. We did look at other models across New York State. There are lots of counties that are doing what we have done, which is kind of take a county level leadership role in looking at EMS models and how they could change, how they could be done differently. Several counties have created a new county department, like just like Sheriff's Department or soil or real property. We have a new department that is EMS, where they employ full-time EMS providers and supply them with ambulances and everything they need. That's obviously the most expensive model that you could choose. A lot of the Finger Lakes counties that are smaller in area, they've got maybe similar population to us, but they're about half our size in terms of square miles. that might make some more sense for them. However, for us, two factors kind of contributed to our thinking that a county-wide district or a county-wide department would really not be as effective as you might think. The first is the sheer size of Lewis County. If you did some type of centralized model where we placed either county personnel or a county-wide district personnel at centralized locations in the northern, central, and southern zones, you really can't justify full-time 24/7 coverage in the northern and southern zones. There isn't enough call volume to justify having a full-time EMS team, driver and paramedic, there all the time. That's issue number one. Issue number two is that a majority of our calls are Medicaid and Medicare patients. That means the cost that you're paying to have someone there full-time to really not make a lot of runs is compounded by the fact that when you do make a run, the odds are your reimbursement or payment for that run is going to be less than what it costs you to even roll the ambulance out the garage. The third factor is that if you're in the southern zone, for example, you could still easily be 20 to 25 minutes away from some parts of the county, northern zone too. So even if you did have an EMT that was ready to go, paged out, and could hop in an ambulance immediately, they would still be quite a distance from some of these calls. So the philosophy that we came up with, that I would say kind of, came from Jeff, but everybody got on board with, was that, the best case scenario for Lewis County, a place like Lewis County, is still someone from your community that lives or works in your community is able to get paged, hop into an ambulance, and be at your house. It's personal care, it's someone that you know, and also it's close, and they're able to get there on time. So, and then Bob pointed out that with a centralized model, 10% of our events are multi-casualty events, so 2 vehicle crashes or a vehicle with a rollover where you have 2 or more casualties. If you had a centralized type system where you had one provider that was ready to go, you would still need the volunteer network and other agencies on those multi-casualty events, right? Because one ambulance is not enough.
That would be 10% of our trauma cases.
Okay.
Would be, which would be motor vehicle crashes. And now we're starting to run into ATV, UTV crashes, and those are extremely remote. And there again, that's just compounding more hours on the road. So it wouldn't work with a 3 ambulance model in that there would be no mutual aid. We'd be starting to call other counties to draw them in and taking away their resources to cover our issues. So just leaving our current network in place is the best model.
So if our thesis is that the current model of volunteers is what would work best for Lewis County in the future, then the question becomes, how do we support those volunteers and how do we grow the base of volunteers that we have? And so that leads to page 5 and a series of recommendations that the committee has made. So like I said, the goal number 1 that the committee set is to support EMS providers by offsetting the personal cost of serving their communities. And the first policy recommendation that the board, that the committee has made is that the county will reimburse EMS providers for each call. What we're proposing is a $40 reimbursement per call for EMS providers and a $25 reimbursement per call for volunteer ambulance drivers. This would be something that the county would theoretically cover the cost of. And if there's 1,500 calls a year covered by volunteers, and you have 1 EMS provider and 1 driver, that cost of the county would be $150,000 a year. This is a conclusion that other counties in rural areas of the state have come to as well. However, there are legislative barriers. The state has issues. We were just on the phone earlier today, actually, with an EMS attorney, a gentleman named Brad Pinsky, who was chatting with Joan and I. And Joan, maybe you retained some of the legalese better than I did.
She stepped out.
Okay. Well, two issues. One is workers' compensation. Right now, if you're a volunteer and you get injured on the job, you're covered under the volunteer workers' compensation firefighter EMS fund, which I'm sure isn't called that, but something like that. And then if they, we're going to become, paid employees and not volunteers, then if they got injured and got seriously injured, they would only be entitled to the small amount of, money that we were providing them. And maybe they got injured where they couldn't work for quite some time. So the risk on the volunteer EMS providers on that front they'd be taking on a larger risk. The second issue is that the state has minimum wage laws. And so if they become an employee and we pay them $40, per run, and the run takes 4 hours, that's $10 an hour. Current minimum wage is over $14. So there's some challenges. The attorney that we chatted with thinks that Lewis County would be a great place for a pilot legislation for the state to give us authority to kind of move forward with something on a trial basis. We're the perfect size, and we've done the homework to justify the state kind of giving us permission. We're not the first to come across this problem, but maybe we could be leaders in the state in terms of trying to come up with something that allows us to do this. So as of right now, we couldn't implement this policy tomorrow. However, I think we need to add our voice to the rural counties in the state that are trying to push this idea of stipend. So something potentially for the future.
Right, can I ask Bob a question? There was an article, I think it was in the Watertown Times this weekend, but it was dealing with the EMS calls and the EMS going up. And kind of the crux of it was they were going to take the place of an emergency room or urgent care center.
So that's called community paramedicine.
Okay.
Yep, and community paramedicine has to be regionally approved. And we've looked at some models, and there are some models in our area. In Jefferson County and St. Lawrence County, they are doing community paramedicine.
Okay.
And that is going to be a paid ambulance agency taking the lead on that and putting a paramedic in the field to do follow-up care, in-home follow-up care. When this first came out, there was a lot of knee-jerk reactions from the nurses unions, et cetera, stating, oh my God, they're going to take our jobs. Home health nurses didn't like it, so on and so forth. And what it did is, after working with them and actually working with those groups, it actually showed that it actually enhances the field care and the level of care that those patients are getting. And it's not always about, being paid for, doing something. It is actually about patient care. So we currently have one ambulance agency in the county that would be able to do community paramedicine. However, I don't believe at this time that they're postured and ready to do that.
So that would be a different version.
It would be, and it would be a different structure.
I hadn't heard of it, but then I thought of that. Thank you.
So a little disappointing that, we're not going to be able to execute that first policy right away, but definitely something that we can work on. The second policy that the committee is recommending is that the county makes a one-time payment to the EMS agencies for capital expenditures. We tossed this one around quite a bit. The philosophy is that, a lot of these volunteers, in addition to the time that they have to take on calls and getting their certification, recertification, many of them have to do fundraisers and try to scrimp and save in order to just keep their rolling stock, their ambulance and their equipment up to date and able to get out the door. So if we could alleviate some of that stress and alleviate some of the time burden that they have to spend on fundraising, that would be something that could help retain these folks so that they don't get burned out quite as easily. The number that we had come up with was $245,000, and basically it's $17,500 per ambulance. So Search and Rescue has 7 ambulances, so they would be eligible to receive $122,500. Every other agency in the county has 1 ambulance, so they would receive $17,500. We talked a lot about different models of how we could help with these capital expenditures. We thought about doing a program where the county buys, replaces an ambulance every year, which would be about $250,000 to $300,000 a year per ambulance. The problem with that is there's, 8 or 6, whatever, what are we up here? 8 ambulance agencies. That would mean the Board of Legislators in 2031 would have to be on the same page as the Board of Legislators today. Otherwise, Lions Falls gets a new ambulance and Harrisville never does. So that's a challenge to commit to something that far in the future. We don't know what the financial situation or political makeup of the board is going to be in the future. The second thing we thought of was kind of enfolding these ambulances into our capital program. Okay, so the county more or less is the owner, and we kind of lease them out to the agencies, and we manage the fleet. That's really talking about an incredible financial commitment for the long run. Again, is not something necessarily, and also it kind of erodes the autonomy of those local agencies as well. So what we settled on for now was a one-time, and then if boards in the future want to continue that, they can. But we're not, we're not buying one ambulance for one agency. We're distributing the wealth evenly every year. So that was kind of.
I don't have a question.
What about the 4 outside agencies that you identified here? Nothing for them?
Anyone want to summarize our discussion on that?
So our focus was on the Lewis County agencies, and although they do service Lewis County, and some of them actually have a large area within Lewis County, we needed to keep our focus on Lewis County. If we want to increase that number and give a portion of that 17,000 to those associated agencies, I think that we could rewrite something, but far be it for me to make that decision. We had to focus on our Lewis County agencies because it's Lewis County tax dollars.
I think that's what it came down to, Phil, was, I'm trying to recall the discussions, we definitely talked about this.
And we did.
I think it was hesitancy to, provide funding to agencies that are not located in the county.
And I understand that, but in my neck of the woods, Natural Bridge does a lot of calls. And they go by me, that's how I see them, and I wouldn't be surprised they're covering at least half of the calls. You probably know better than me, Bob,
I do.
but they cover a lot of calls, and actually Carthage does too. So
I certainly do.
it would seem like something to show appreciation or whatever.
And, after we talked about that at committee, there was something that we had to list an initial presentation to take care of our ambulance agencies within the county. If we want to expand on that, I'm sure that we could probably, look at it again and figure out other alternatives.
I certainly wouldn't advocate for a full boat on something like that. Not 17.5, but.
One of the other things that we talked about was providing X amount of dollars per town, so then they can decide if, for example, Diana is half served by Natural Bridge or Carthage, they can divide it up, however they want. So we can talk more about this.
Thank you.
The next policy recommendation, again, this is all to serve the goal of support our volunteer EMS providers by offsetting the personal cost of serving their communities. The county will manage, the next policy is the county will manage a contract for countywide EMS medical director. This is one that kind of came up, you guys might recall that the county employs a medical director for a lot of our departments. DSS has a medical director, public health has a medical director, Dr. Palmer had to step up big time during the pandemic. In fact, all of the orders, the prescription more or less for the vaccines in Lewis County were under her order. So it's a job that sometimes doesn't require a lot, sometimes it does. And every agency, every EMS agency has to have a medical director. And a lot of them have struggled to keep a relationship with someone. We had someone in place countywide for quite a while, but when the county health system switched to Delphine Emergency Room, we don't always have a consistent doctor present there that can be that liaison and that consistent voice with whom our agencies can work. However, when this issue came up in our discussions, Bob got to work right away and actually has formed a new relationship for a countywide medical director that will handle all the agencies in Lewis County as long as they sign off on it. They don't have to worry about managing that contract themselves anymore. And I believe Dr. Mathis is, who we came
It's
up
Dr. Tim Mathis. He's actually medical director for numerous agencies in Oneida County, so he's very familiar with this process. He's a great EMS advocate. I would put him right up there with Dr. Harney, who was our EMS director for years. And he's definitely engaged with the community. Our problem with switching from Dr. Howland sooner than what we did, because Dr. Howland's our former medical director, the problem with that was we couldn't find somebody to make a commitment to Lewis County. And I know that sounds a little rough around the edges, but if you're just going to be here for 6 months and move on down the road, that's changing, that's paperwork, that's more work for these agencies over and over again. So getting Dr. Mathis to sign on was a big plus to a lot of these agencies, and it gives them stability.
we have a contract for paying a small amount for our medical directors for DSS and public health. And so, knock on wood, Dr. Mathis has agreed to kind of do this for us at this point, kind of pro bono. However, the county would commit, what we're asking is the county to commit to kind of matching that same type of stipend that we pay our other department medical directors for these EMS agencies in the future.
Dr. Mathis is Delphi.
Dr. Mathis is a Lewis County general employee. I believe he's the new medical director for the ER.
Yeah, it's a contract up through Delphi. That's our medical program.
The last policy recommendation under supporting our volunteers is the county will increase the real property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and EMS providers. Is something that this committee, or the Board of Legislators, has already discussed in depth with Candy Aiken. She presented a few months ago. That we're not eligible to change that policy until 2024, but my recollection of that discussion with the board is that everyone was in favor of doing that. So when we're able to make that change, we will, and that'll allow us to write off 10% of assessed value without a cap for the primary residence of each volunteer EMS provider in Lewis County. So it's hard to put a figure exactly on how much that's going to cost. It wouldn't be an expenditure, it would just be foregone revenue that we would not collect. So not something we have to really necessarily budget for, but we just have to be aware that there is, a cost associated with doing that. Okay, that kind of concludes the goals of supporting the existing volunteers. The second goal was to increase the number of volunteers in Lewis County. We're on page 7 at this point. The policy recommendation, the first one for this is county will assist BOCES with the implementation of a new 2-year EMS program for juniors and seniors. Bob and I have had really great conversations with Stephen Todd and Jeff Ginger at BOCES. They have actually stood up their own committee, the BOCES EMT Advisory Committee, and they've met a couple times. What they're asking out of the county is in order to launch this program, they'd like us to help cover the upfront capital costs. So they'll cover the cost of the instructor, they'll cover the cost of, running the program on a day-to-day basis. But there's a lot of training materials and medical supplies and stuff like that that the program will need to get up and running. So they've made a list and they've met with Bob to look over that list, and it comes in around $60,000 of materials. Bob, I'll let you expand on that.
So when we initially had our meeting, we found out that they actually have a CIC on staff, which is somebody who can train EMS providers. So already certified, already paid by them, already engaged with them. Teaches a different style class right now. When she was talking about getting this thing off the ground, she was talking about, well, some ambulance agencies have expired items on their vehicles that they need to take off. And we'll collect those and we'll use those in class. That's great for bandages and stuff like that. But when you're talking about electronic devices, like I said earlier, the basic EMTs are doing acquisitions of 12 EKGs. A cardiac monitor is $45,000 to $60,000 by itself. So a cheap one is going to be in that price range. Last thing you want to do is train a new EMT on something that's 40 years old, that when you turn it on, it shuts off immediately. You'll just have a continuum of challenges, and it may be discouraging to them. So putting the appropriate equipment in their hands early on, stuff that works and works well. And it's many other things. It's traction splints that are $300 a piece. It's KED, Kendrick extraction devices, that are $600 a piece. It's things like that that they're going to be putting their hands on that are new, that aren't going to be broken and used from ambulance agencies. And that's just going to help enhance the class.
The next, so this is very exciting. We're hoping fall of 2024 is when this program will get off the ground for the first two-year cycle. Next policy recommendation is we support new EMS providers by providing reimbursement for classroom materials such as textbooks, workbooks, and study materials. We already started doing this. In fact, some of the towns have already started doing it as well, Denmark being the leader that started doing this. So any new EMT or provider that is looking to go through the class, the county will provide their books, study materials, and I don't know what else they apply for, but since unfortunately we haven't had a lot of new people, the cost is relatively low, under $5,000, but if we had, 40 new people, our cost would go up.
So the book or the ebook, it runs around the $100 to $150 range, and then a simple little thing like a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff would go a long way, and that's an expense of like $30. So it's really not a heavy lift, but it's those little things that go a long way towards supporting these volunteer EMS agencies, so they haven't got to go do a chicken barbecue to raise money to be able to buy that book, or put additional financial strains on those smaller agencies.
So those are the policy recommendations. If you turn to page 8, you'll take a look at kind of the preliminary budget that we put together. What we're talking about is $470,000 basically in 2023 and $160,000 per year thereafter. However, obviously a large portion of that is trying to get off the ground the paying of our providers. And that's about $150,000 a year. If we're not able to find a way to get that off the ground, then obviously that commitment, the financial commitment is much less. But you can see, kind of how we've laid out each of those programs that the committee has put together. So the conclusion of the report is, basically, to reiterate our thesis, a lot of counties across New York State have really fundamentally changed the EMS model in their communities, whether the county is taking it over outright or setting up a county-wide district where there's a separate taxing authority that is supporting these agencies. Either way, that's a significant change from how we do things here in Lewis County. And the committee felt that to the extent possible, the best thing we can do is try to maintain our volunteer network. That's the best way to get care quickly to people's homes. It's the best way to make sure that we have mutual aid during large-scale events. And it's cost-effective, compared to really starting up a huge new agency or a tax district. So that was basically the conclusion that we came to. And if we can implement some of these policies, the committee feels that we can, hopefully stabilize that number of providers in Lewis County. Last note, some people to thank that were not on the committee, but definitely stepped up to help us. Stephen Todd and Jeff Ginger at BOCES, Joan McNichol, Candy Aiken, Cassandra Mosher, and of course, all the folks that work in EMS, volunteers, and the folks that are paid in Lewis County. We're very grateful for all that you do for our community, and we appreciate your service. That's it.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it was, I think, very robust discussion at all the meetings, and it's a robust recommendation. I hope that we can implement the first, but if not, then we at least have started this discussion and hopefully continuing. This is nothing, unique to Lewis County or to just EMS volunteerism in town everywhere, so I do think this is a good start, I guess we'll say that. So.
Can I add one thing? Oh, geez. One thing I didn't mention is probably my favorite statistic in the whole, that I learned throughout this whole process. In Lewis County, for every one fire call, there's 6 EMS calls. Okay, 6 to 1. And I certainly would not advocate for any funding being taken away from our fire departments, because they have a lot of similar issues with volunteerism and their budgets and all the time and effort they have to put in. But if you look at where the resources flow from our municipalities, it's disproportionate to where the call and need is in our community. So that's something that, as you guys are out of your town board meetings, something to keep in mind.
But I think it's partially because of, you can have a fire contract, which is required. An EMS contract is not, it's more of a state policy that.
Yeah, we glossed over that, but it is in the report. To provide EMS at the local level is not a mandated service. The state mandates that towns and villages and municipalities have to have fire coverage. They do not mandate that you have to have EMS coverage. So I think most people would agree that it pretty much is a mandate, it is a necessity, but legally, it's not, right? Yeah.
As Lisa had stated, it's not unique to our area. In fact, in 2016, our regional EMS council chair came to Lewis County and all of the other associated counties, which is Jefferson County, St. Lawrence County, and Lewis County. And she did a study to find out how many EMS providers per ambulance agency. And she went and she visited each one, and her findings are actually shocking. There are some smaller ambulance agencies, and it's not just unique to Lewis County, it's Jefferson and St. Lawrence County as well, that are literally hinging on one provider. In other words, if that one provider decided, I'm not gonna renew my card, I'm done, that means that ambulance agency would fold, because there's no one else to do it. So that was a startling discovery that she made, and things have improved, but they haven't improved to the point to where things have stabilized. So by trying and at least bringing this to the public's attention, this will help stabilize EMS, or take strides towards stabilizing EMS within Lewis County. Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Ryan?
Does this committee need to make a motion to move this forward, or what do we have?
Well, there's
Yeah.
7 or 8 policy recommendations, and at least one of them can't be done right now. So if there's any of these that stick out to you today as things you want to move forward right away, we can do that.
Well, why don't we move the whole package, and then if we have to amend that one part, we can.
How about
I was gonna say,
you
can we do that,
move
Joan?
how about you move the package forward? Upon review by the county attorney as to what the board can take action on. All right.
Good with that.
Okay, I'll make that motion if I can get a second. Anything else? Then I think we can move on to draft resolutions.
The first one is amending the compensation plan of County of Lewis with reference to the Community Services Department to create one permanent full-time mental health program coordinator position, grade 5, management exempt, with a salary range of $47,082 to $59,286.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried.
Authorizing an agreement between Lewis County Department of Public Health and Transitional Living Services of Northern New York for the purpose of providing psychological services to qualifying children in the preschool education program for the term of July 5th, 2023 through July 4th, 2024, under the pre-approved NICED rates for same.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carried.
Appropriating funds for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act per the notice of obligational authority period year 21-2 through 2022-4 in the amount of $145,378.54. And per the notice of obligational authority, period year 2022-1 in the amount of $48,688.85.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carried.
Authorizing purchase of 7777 North State Street, Lowell, New York, by the County of Lewis, acting on behalf of the Lewis County Health System at a price of $240,000. And I will note that this will be a roll call vote at the board meeting.
Any discussion?
I have to recuse myself. I'll have a professional conflict on this one.
The desk recuse. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carried.
Authorizing renewal agreement between Lewis County Department of Social Services and Cornell Cooperative Extension of Lewis County to provide supportive and rehabilitative parenting education services from June 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2024, at a monthly flat fee of $5,125, not to exceed $61,500 per year.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carried.
Authorizing agreement with Lewis County Health System for per diem nursing services under the medication-assisted treatment plan for incarcerated individuals suffering from substance abuse disorders for a cost of, and I will note there is a correction, it should be $150 per hour, up to 2 to 6 hours, commencing upon full execution of the agreement for a 1-year term.
It's a bit of a change.
I tried. Any discussion or questions?
So if I could just note, we've been talking about this MAT for quite some time. Pat has been an incredible lead on this, and we're really very grateful in this situation to have a county hospital who has stepped up. We have a nurse that's there Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week, but this medication has to be administered on weekends, it has to be administered on holidays, and our nurse that we have there is also entitled to vacations. So what we're hoping to do is build a pool of nurses from Lewis County Health System that we can draw upon to cover those additional days. And we're also working on another contract for a secondary pool with one of the staffing agencies that Lewis County Health System uses in case there's a day where our nurse isn't available, plus the pool of nurses at Lewis County Health System isn't available. We can try to use one of the traveling nurses or one of the staffing agency nurses. We can't really miss a day with this medication. That's part of the heavy lift of this, is that it has to be done every day.
And if there is no one receiving MAT, then there will be no cost.
True.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries. And no motions or executive session. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay.
that as the months go on here with the new premium rates, that fund balance will grow back up. We'd like it to be above $2 million. Our previous target was $4 million, so obviously we'd love to get back up to $4 million. But the goal for this fund is a stable fund. We don't want to see it going up and down wildly. It's not good for our employees, it's not good for the taxpayers. We want it to be consistent. And so we're at 1.6 at this point. We'll keep you guys updated as the weeks and months go on. That's it.
Okay. I guess we want to go on the motions, we're waiting for the media to show up.
Appropriating payback funds in the CDBG account in the planning department in the amount of $1,021.47 for various community projects.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Standard workday reporting to New York State Retirement System for Josh P. Levicker and Jessica L. Mosier.
Any questions or comments?
I'm just gonna not be involved in this. I didn't submit anything yet, just since my name's in it.
No, you can, you've reported the information correct here.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Authorizing First Amendment to payment in lieu of tax agreement by and with the County of Lewis Industrial Development Agency, BPR Roaring Brook LLC, and the affected taxing jurisdictions, County of Lewis, Town of Martinsburg, and Lawville Central School District for the Roaring Brook Wind Farm Project.
Any questions or comments on that? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried.
There's a good article in the paper if you have any questions about it.
And actually, Cheyenne's here, she could probably explain it,
Yeah.
but we're good.
Authorizing the sale of former Glenfield School property to Rochester's Cornerstone Group LTD and for housing development in the amount of $300,000 contingent upon governmental approvals, tax credits, and grant funding, and this will be a roll call vote at the June board meeting.
So we anticipated having it
Right,
present
we'll have it
before, so I don't know if you wanna wait to, we're
Up to you,
just
Tom.
moving it forward, so.
I don't know if we're gonna disagree with it. The presentation will just give us more information.
Right.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then we've got a motion to approve and accept the new Lewis County flag design by David Stelz.
So this is kind of a unique one, but the county flag that flies outside the courthouse, and we've got one here, is a little bit dated. And the one that flies outside the courthouse needs to be replaced. And a custom-made flag that is going to be that's going to be outside actually costs a little bit of money. It's like $600. So before we buy a new flag that's going to last 3 to 4 more years, we thought maybe we could introduce the idea of a little bit of modernization. But flags aren't usually known by a lot of words on them, like ours does. So this is what we've come up with. Nothing that you guys should have to do. I mean, it's if you don't like the design or you want to keep with tradition, that's fine. But before we bought a new one, we thought maybe we'd present the option to modernize a little bit. So it's up to you.
Any significance to the number of stars?
One for each town.
Interesting. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I can't draw a stick figure, so I'll hold on to this.
I'll make a motion that we accept this design and get a new flag. Get a second.
Yeah.
Jeff, all in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carried.
I will note that legislator Gilbert, when I first met with him when he was elected a few years ago, said that that was one of his goals. He would like us to get a new county flag during his term, so we made it.
And then we have a motion to move that July Board of Legislators regular monthly meeting be held on Wednesday the 5th. And that's because it's normally held on Tuesday, which would be 4th of July holiday. I'll make that a motion. Get a second. Jeff, any questions or comments on it? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I will do.
Tom, I will be requesting an attorney-client privilege session after.
Yep, that'll be the executive session after everything, yep. Do we wait or do we continue?
Let's roll.
Pardon? Okay. We have a presentation on the Glenfield property redevelopment from Rochester Cornerstone Group. And I'm not sure who all is here, but you're welcome to come up and do your presentation.
Do you guys want to sit up?
No.
Alright. Oh, you're fine.
Whatever you want. Trying to make it so that Nick can see what's going on.
Can you see over me, Nick?
That's good.
Okay.
Thanks, James. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Again, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. My name is Ryan Brandt from Rochester Cornerstone Group. I'm our head of our development department.
And I'm Robert Loud, Senior Project Director.
So we're here from Cornerstone Group to, I think as everyone's heard here, look at purchasing and redeveloping the Glenfield Elementary School. So we're excited to share our plans. They're a little bit preliminary at this point, but we'll do 10 minutes or so just kind of introducing who we are, what we're thinking for this school, and be happy to answer any questions afterwards as well. So we're, as I mentioned, we're located in Rochester. We're a development property management company. We specialize in these affordable housing programs. Something we've done for 20 to 30 years. I personally been doing for about 10 years now. But we've developed about 3,000 housing units. So really, we've gone as far west as Erie County, gone as far west as probably Oswego or Tompkins County. Tompkins County probably farthest south, and we've gone up to St. Lawrence County to Potsdam as well. So this would be our first development into Lewis County, and we'll get into a little bit later why we thought the time was good and the site was right, and we feel we could have a good partnership here. But despite all this work we've done, we know that every development has to fit the community that it's going in. It's not a one size fits all for programming and the residents and the rents and everything like that. So we're kind of pledging to be collaborative in this effort, and we'll explain a little bit more later about how we aim to do so. But we do recognize, especially being up here in the North Country, that there's a lot of pride that people have in their communities, and we want to be a good partner in doing that. So just one of the other things I want to start off with too is our property management arm manages about 4,000 housing units. One site in Pennsylvania actually, but we do manage a site up in Potsdam. And so one of the benefits of our proposal here is we're not going to be flipping the building. We're not going to be here for just during construction and development and be handing the keys to a different property management firm. We're going to be here long term. Our management arm as well, having on-site management. So you're going to see our faces and Cornerstone property managers for a long time after the building's done. So.
Great, so I guess why Lewis County? Why would a Rochester company want to come out to Lewis County? Well, we have some local roots here, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But affordable housing and independent senior living is what we're proposing here. And the funding sources that we get from New York State Homes and Community Renewal We typically see those funding sources going to more urban, and the rural communities tend to be underserved. So we really believe that this project can have a really transformational, make a transformational difference in the community. And then partnered with some public works improvements that we're hearing about in the town of Glenfield, we really think that this redevelopment of the Glenfield Elementary School will bring the school full circle back to a community gathering point for years to come.
So just to speak to some of the connections, I went to school up in Canton, St. Lawrence University graduate. My wife went to Potsdam, so we didn't meet up there, but we ended up first started dating, and obviously made her my wife, so it's kind of a North Country love story, I guess you could call it. A bunch of other family members that went to school up here too, but met a lot of lifelong friends up there too from Lewis County when I was at school, and you could tell just really the pride and the love that they had for their homes here in Lewis County. So that's always stuck with me, and I think when this opportunity popped up, a couple with Rob's, some of his connections here, we decided to jump on it, and I really enjoyed kind of getting to know a little bit more about the Glenfield, Martinsburg, and Lewis County communities at large here, and excited to continue to explore it and see what we end up with here. So, yeah, I think as Rob said, there's a lot of wheels in motion, right, that we can kind of build off of here. Some of the infrastructure that's already kind of being talked about, and proposed, and the existing public transportation lines over at Main Street in Glenfield. There's a lot of good things, and a lot of reasons that we think we can pitch this narrative to the state as to why this site deserves their allocation of funding.
So I'm going to go over the project a little bit in more detail. So $21 million seems like a lot, but we are actually proposing a lot. The former elementary school will be rehabilitated into approximately 25 apartments with a child daycare. We are also proposing a new standalone 24-unit building in the field area. The project will contain approximately 54 apartments. We're working on the unit counts right now. The architect needs to come in and measure the building, so there's going to be a combination of studios, primarily one-bedroom apartments and two-bedroom apartments as well. We like to add two-bedroom apartments in senior communities because we do get a lot of reasonable accommodation requests for medical equipment where seniors do need a second bedroom. We are proposing daycare in the space. The existing playground will be retained, maintained, brought up to code with respect to the play surface. We'll add a fence. And then we are also planning on putting a picnic pavilion where the basketball courts are right now. That will house approximately six picnic tables and a barbecue pit. That whole park area will then be subdivided and dedicated back to the town of Martinsburg as a new town park. The rents for the apartment buildings will be affordable and capped based on our market study. So we're not going to charge any rents. We're not going to charge egregious market rents. They're going to be affordable, and they're based on HUD regulations for the property. Amenities within the building will include a community garden in this back section with raised garden beds that will be accessible to residents that are in wheelchairs, mobility scooters, and whatnot. There will be a fitness center in the building, a community room with a kitchen, and laundry facilities. It also goes without saying, these buildings are going to be highly efficient buildings in terms of energy efficiency measures. And will likely be either LEED or Enterprise Green certified upon completion. And the standalone building, this is what we are proposing. It's going to be a 2-story building, potentially with balconies and a wraparound porch. I always like to say, if you like this building, that's what it'll look like. If you don't like it, it'll look like something else. And we're going to work with the town of Martinsburg and Lewis County on siding selections and all of the details and whatnot. We really want to make sure that the building fits into the community.
Just to speak a little bit more about the rents, we'll have a long-term regulatory agreement, an extended use agreement that we recorded with the county clerk. So there won't be a an opportunity after 5 years for us to sell, and someone comes in and jacks up the rents, and all of a sudden it's not what the town and, Hamlin County thought that they were getting. So that'll be publicly reported, and Joan, we could share some of those with you or any other legislators. A sample one, I guess, of an existing one we've entered into. But so we've, as I mentioned before, we've done a lot of these type of developments. They're all a little bit different, right? Every community, there's not a cookie cutter approach, especially when you're dealing with an existing school, right? There's no, we've seen a lot of schools, and we're working on a couple other ones right now. There's no school just like that when it's quite a gem. So we'll obviously apply some of our, development expertise here, and using our design professionals as well, the architects and civil engineers, surveyors, everybody. We'll come together with something, and obviously we've got to go through all the steps of planning board and everything else. But we're happy to provide municipal references too, if anyone has any questions about how we've been able to work with other villages and towns and counties. And simply just let us know, or browse our website and check it out for yourself. But we're, as I mentioned before, we're pretty excited about it. I hopefully other people in the county are as well. And anything else we want to say?
We'll open it up to any questions.
How many people would you feel will be involved living there?
Our goal right now is, where we're sketching now, is 54 total units that we made up of about hopefully 25 in the existing one, and then something like 30 in this new one. So it's really going to be kind of a campus type setting. Of course, you'll have that park there that plays into it as well. But there'll be a lot of planning involved, the civil engineer and architect, to make sure it's not that this new building's that's kind of plopped in without any thought as to how the whole campus is going to lay out.
Would they be all single family? I mean, like a man and wife type thing?
Be one veteran, so that could be the case. Typically, we build these, we find they're individuals. It's a single veteran. There are some couples that end up living there, but more often than not, it's just a single individual over 62.
Okay. What about security? What type of security would you have there?
We've pretty standard for all of our units are fob entrances now. So every resident would get their own fob. And they support some other things too. Then typically they have their own apartment key as well. We're putting cameras on all our facilities, no matter what income and rents we're serving now. It's just kind of a product of, fortunately, the way that the world is right now, and also the, just protect ourselves. Slip and fall cases, for example, kind of shot through the roof. So just we're looking at security cameras really at any buildings wherever we can, which obviously helps with security too, right? Just to be able to know what's going on there. And so there's with a good additional list I think we could provide to door peepholes, things like that. But most of it surrounds the building itself, right? Just making sure that there's controlled access to that building. And
so you wouldn't have necessarily in-person security?
Usually not. We'd have 24/7 on call, like a maintenance tech as well, and we have someone there during business hours, a community manager or leasing agent. But we've never, unless something goes very wrong, again, there's sometimes something happens, we have to engage security with a particular tenant to be there. But usually they function very well, just as independent senior living.
And I'm sure they would, but I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I was wondering about was childcare. You were kind of quick about that. Whereabouts would that be?
So we're working on it right now. We've identified both space in the main building, but also in the rear wing. We kind of want to see if we can get it as separated off from the rest of the apartment building as possible.
So that if wherever it would be in an existing building.
Mm-hmm. It would be in the existing building, yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of rules and regulations for childcare, right, with the secure access and as Rob said, we really want to make sure that it's as protected as possible in terms of the access points, right? So that's why I think we're starting to lean more towards that.
The rear.
The rear addition, yeah.
So how many children do you anticipate?
I don't know that
Would you guys run it, or would you lease it out to
No,
somebody?
we would contract with somebody, yeah, lease it to somebody. So I know it sounds like there's been some interest in the past from providers, but that's something we're gonna start actively seeking out as partners, whether it's, you know, local or, you know, franchises or whatever it may be, just try and find the right fit. We're not in the business, our companies of providing their daycare. We'll have to work with them very closely because we'd be managing their space, but we'd be leasing to them, yeah.
Let the experts do it.
Yes, right, yeah, ideally get them involved upfront with the design too, right, about the, you know, number of sinks and bathrooms and security and everything like that, so. But your security question before, I think that daycare part of it, that's kind of in and of itself its own, you know, assessment that has to be made, right, just with the, making sure that that is kind of being operated almost entirely separately from the rest of the building.
Okay, my time is done.
I had a couple of questions. Do you, have you guys converted other schools into affordable housing?
We have, yes, we've converted a number of them, and we're actually working on two others right now. One down in Onondaga County and one over in Niagara County. That one's been vacant in Niagara County for 20 years, so it's an entirely different situation, different condition than Glenfield is. So they typically size very well and fit very well with, you know, each classroom.
Right.
Often just, you know, becoming a unit size, and sometimes the unit sizes get a little wonky. There's some that are a few square feet bigger than others, but we found they do work out pretty well for just the one bedroom units kind of taking up the same space. So.
Does your company serve as a landlord going forward? You're a development company, or do you then contract out?
Yeah, we're gonna be continuing to manage the property post completion, so you're gonna have to put up with us
Completion
for
and
many, many
then,
years. Yes.
and then,
Yeah, so Cornerstone Property Managers is our property management arm,
okay.
Which is owned by Rochester's Cornerstone Group, and they will be the property management company that will have the on-site presence moving forward once we complete the redevelopment.
We're having weekly calls with them. The fact that they're kind of a different company within our company, and we're still having weekly calls with them, and, you know, anything related to design or operations or budgeting, like it's not like oh, that's your thing, that's not our thing. It's very very much valued as one company, and their head of the property management sits like 70 feet away from us, so it's a pretty tight knit group, even though we've expanded a lot of the last 5 years.
And in the event that the daycare center wasn't something that was feasible, do you have anything in mind for that area?
We're open to suggestions. We could potentially add more units, or if there was another community benefit that Lewis County, Glenfield need. Since the proposal is so preliminary at this point, we can mold this to what we really need right now.
I did think my time was done, but I did have one more question. You said you're in it for the long term, and is there anything in the contract or whatever for assurances of that?
Yeah, so we have to file a long-term regulatory agreement with the county clerk. And there's going to be an investor that's going to fund a good portion of this. And our exit from the partnership is highly regulated, and it's virtually impossible for us to leave.
We've developed 42 over the past 25 years, I think it is, 42 of these, and we've never had that happen where we exit prior to the 15 years. We could, the whole ownership structure and the tax credit kind of structure of this is might be more than the time we have today. We're perfectly willing to go into it, but it's as rather there's an investor that comes in, we're still the general partner, who's the day-to-day operations and part of the ownership structure, just due to the 15-year tax credit compliance period and the funding for those the depreciation of that. The investor is the majority owner, but again, we've never been forced to exit the partnership.
And when we meet investors, it's likely going to be KeyBank, Chase Bank, Adirondack Bank, something like that.
Or these aren't these aren't a, individual investor coming in. These are people that need the tax credits, banks, so it's, Rob said it's almost always a bank.
So you're on the hook for 15 years.
Right, we have guarantees, we have provided these as well, operating guarantees, environmental guarantees, that go beyond construction. So it's, that was actually the reason that we started our management company 10 years ago, is because using third-party management, we just didn't have quite as much control over that. We'd have operating deficits or deficits in the budget, and we'd be on the hook for it as the development company or the guarantor. So having that management company has really helped us over the last 10 years to mitigate that risk. And so to exit it, someone else would have to be taking on those guarantees. And I don't think the investor doesn't want to kick us out. Those banks don't want to kick us out, because then they'd be on the hook for these guarantees.
So does one entity own the real property and another entity does the management?
There will be two owners. There's an LLC that we're part of, and then there's a Housing Development Fund Corporation that will own the real estate. So yeah, you're right. There's one's the beneficial owner, one's the legal owner. Yeah, but it all comes back to us as the guarantor in the end. So yeah.
Todd, can I ask a question? Realistically, shovel in the ground.
We're thinking fall of next year. We're going to be submitting for New York State Homes and Community Renewal in their next funding round in December. We would assume that an award would be made in April of next year, if we were to get awarded in that competitive round, and then we can close within 6 months.
There's two funding rounds per year for this funding with homes in renewal. So those are people are looking to access these tax credits. So that the state is allocating these tax credits that then we sell to the investors for their admittance into the partnership. There's low interest loans as well. So as Rob said, we'd be looking to go in this fall, and then everything goes well, and we think it's a very compelling proposal and narrative we're going to tell the state. That's what would bring about the next fall shovel in the ground and start construction.
So what happens in the interim? What would your involvement be with keeping the heat on, the lights on, whatever?
I think we're still working through that with the contract, right?
Yeah.
We're willing to,
Talk about that.
that's, so our project attorney and Joe are working through the purchase and sale agreement to define the exact specifics of that.
Because we're not anticipating closing until the end of next year, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Cornerstone doesn't want it to deteriorate anymore, so they have already talked about working something out to make sure it gets winterized.
December 1st, right? At the date of
December
31st. Yeah, so it would be, so eventually, one storm in particular that's just deteriorated so badly that it's, literally the roof is caving in. So we don't think that'll be the case with Glenfield, but still the price of the rehab's gonna go up.
We can sell you
it's left
school like that.
winterized.
We're interested in a school like that.
Well, it does snow here and get cold too.
Yes.
Oh,
No, we definitely want to keep the heat on, and make sure the building is stabilized so that it doesn't deteriorate. Also, freeze thaw, so we're going to want to keep the heat at a certain level to make sure that the building does not deteriorate while we're waiting for closing to happen. And we're going to be in the building pretty constantly because we're going to have to go through all of the design and approvals process.
So you will have a good presence here.
I think so.
In the interim.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not sure how many visits there'll be over that many X number of months, but the environmental testing and actually taking the samples and the design, general contractor probably want to get in there and poke your head around to certain things. So there'll be a good amount of, not every day, I'm not sure we can fit every week, but if that helps in case of disaster, right? If there's a burst pipe or whatever, I think that'll be definitely helpful to be able to be aware of those type of things.
Last week,
we were fortunate, the committee that Naturally Lewis put together to kind of review proposals, was able to meet with these guys, and they already had on site their architect and one of their construction managers. So, you know, they're very organized and they've got their ducks in a row.
Do you do the, Rob, do you do the construction in-house? Do you have your own construction arm?
No, we'll be hiring a general contractor that will oversee, we'll sign the construction contract with that general contractor, and then they will put it out to bid. And then we'll try and honestly get as many local bids as possible. And then we're gonna have to vet and de-scope all of the bids, and then throw together the actual construction budget.
And we're always willing and really look forward to having local labor, meet and greets and some of the, renovations we're working on now and, walkthroughs of the building with local subcontractors, right? 'Cause I think that helps a lot of times. It's not just a blank proposal or bid request that's sent out for them. So that's what we definitely intend to do everything we can. And, in the end, the price has to be competitive. And I think as we mentioned last week, we don't foresee any wage requirements on this as of now. Every once in a while, something changes and we do have to use prevailing wages, but typically it's just an open shop bidding process.
Even with state money, you don't expect to have to pay prevailing wage.
Right. Yeah, it's typically, I know some state sources do. There's some of the federal money that could come in, be what triggers it, but our state funding, I don't think it has ever triggered. It's only been within certain federal sources that come in.
What about the design? Will you do that internally or do you hire that out as well?
We have a contract with SWBR Architects out of Syracuse. We typically do a lot of our design work with SWBR. They're very reputable. They've done a lot of these affordable housing, independent senior living projects.
We'll definitely have a lot of input on it. So maybe too much input if you ask them. We
But
involved in the details and
realistically, it's going to be a community effort. And then as the developer, they work for us. We do have the final say. So they're not going to propose anything outrageous. And then we're not just going to go along with it.
we usually bring our property management on in as well, just to make sure that things like security access for, okay, we don't want this side of the building to be able to enter that side of the building, and especially with daycare. So we find it's typically worked pretty well, and we always try to learn lessons from our previous buildings. If you didn't like something the way it went, you just apply it to the next one. And it's kind of tried and true team. The architects and typically use the same general contractor, so it's worked very well for us.
Any other questions, comments? If not, we thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Good presentation.
Really looking forward to it.
Good to have you.
I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that covers everything for the regular meeting. I understand we need an executive session.
Yeah. I wanted to bring the committee up to speed on a couple of litigation matters that we may need to take action at the board meeting, so I want to inform finance and board.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? Jeff, second it. All in favor, aye? Aye. We'll be going into executive session.